My dear friend Susan Allan, she works with aging clients and their families as a senior living consultant. And she finds the right place for seniors. She provides recommendations of the best senior living options north of Los Angeles in Camarillo, Ventura, Ojai, Santa Barbara, and points north. So she covers a lot of territory with this. And each family is given individual care and support, which is very different from what other firms provide in senior living support. Susan offers a complimentary 1-hour private telephone session so that everyone can find the best solution. And Susan Allan always says if you do 100% of what works and 0% of what doesn't, you can have the life that you dream about. So we're excited to hear what Susan has to say because we all want an enriched, happy, successful life, of course.
Thank you.
Now, I know, Susan, we've talked about the example of a parent traveling with a small child, putting on the oxygen mask first up in that airplane. And how does this apply to caregivers also?
If you've ever cared for somebody, it could be a child, could be a partner, a loved one, it could be parents, it could be siblings, and you have to take care of that person for whatever reason. You have to be in good enough shape to be able to do it. That's what the oxygen mask is all about on the airplane. The parent has to put the mask on first. Only then will you have enough oxygen in your brain to be able to help the child. Well, the same thing is true if you're a caregiver. First of all, if you're caring for elderly people, the only reason they need an assisted living facility is they no longer have the ability to care for themselves. And the lack of ability to care for oneself is almost always a mental decline problem. Almost always a mental decline problem. It may be observable that the person has fallen. It may be observable that the person needs insulin or whatever. But I am going to talk to you tonight with GiGi and talk about all the things that the rest of us do to prevent those conditions. And what I find again and again when I work with the elderly who need assisted living is they have not been taking care of themselves sufficiently. So if you're going to be the caregiver, you have to start at the top of the head and work your way down. Don't do it in a bit by bit, piece by piece kind of strategy.
Now, Susan, I know that you have known a number of friends and who have actually exhausted themselves caring for beloved family members. What is the message about this?
Well, you know, we could devote this show to the memory of my dear, dear friend, Patty Kelly, who was perfectly healthy, and then she married and they were very much in love, and her husband became ill, and she would drive from Santa Barbara to Las Vegas again and again and again every single week, and she thoroughly exhausted herself, exhausted her immune system, developed cancer, and ultimately died. And this was a number of years ago, and it was devastating to watch her. I mean, there are a lot of ways to get to Vegas, including the most logical, which is an airplane, rather than driving all those hours week after week after week when you're in your 80s. It was not a practical strategy. She wasn't being the caregiver, taking care of herself first.
So important. Now, I know that personally with my parents, when they were near the end of their lives, they needed so much help. How can someone really take care of a parent or a spouse, loved one, focus on their own self-care?
Well, if you understand on an airplane that if you don't put the oxygen mask on yourself first, you're not going to have enough brain function to care for your child and get the oxygen mask on the child. If you really understand this, and if you fly, often and you hear the hostess saying this again and again and again, you start to get it. So if you understand that, then you need to understand the same thing is true about caregiving. If somebody is elderly, you have to be highly functional in order for you to care for them, in order for you to make proper decisions for them. And I see this because, again and again and again, the parent, the grandparent may want to make their own decisions, but they simply can't. So I need an intelligent, functional family member who can do it. And you've got to take care of yourself. You've got to be that person who can make the best decisions for someone you love.
Absolutely. Now, I know it sounds as if we have to really focus on loving ourselves if we are indeed the caregiver, not just loving the patient, right?
Yeah, it's all about love. That if you love yourself, you're going to make proper decisions for yourself. If you're exhausted, you're going to have to sleep. You can't keep putting it off. If you're hungry, you have to eat, and I don't mean M&Ms, I mean, nutritious food. And you have to be able to do all the other things that go into self-care. And it's one thing if somebody's in ER and then they're, in the hospital for a couple of days and, there's a crisis. If it's a crisis, that's a different story. When my friend's mother was admitted to Cottage Hospital, the daughter's an MD and the son is a very, very bright guy, and they didn't like what was happening with her care, and so they slept there. They took turns sleeping in the room with their mother because that was the only way that they could make sure that their mother was going to get the proper care. But they only had to do it for 10 days and there were 2 of them. What would you do if you're the only child? You can't get a decent night's sleep. You've got to at some point say, I have to pray that the hospital is going to take care of her. I can't be here and function after a certain point. So that's about loving yourself enough to care for yourself, also knowing that if you love your parent or you love your elderly spouse, you've got to take care of yourself.
Absolutely, very important. Now, what about sleep deprivation, forgetting to exercise, forgetting to eat properly? About those M&Ms. No, I won't go there. I know that this is actually a very common crisis. And so what can caregivers really do to prevent this?
It's about scheduling, really. I mean, you have to be vigilant about it. When my mother was near death, I was very fortunate because she could afford care and she was at home. And I always made sure that I went out for an hour every single day. Now, I came up with lots of errands to do, and my mother certainly could have given me enough errands to do as well, but I made sure that every single day I went out for an hour or an hour and a half. And it made all the difference because when I would walk out of my mother's place, I was just, I needed to decompress. And then I'd be out in reality in, beautiful Florida, get into her beautiful car, go to the grocery store, be around normal people who weren't ill, and, be back in a functional environment. It made a huge difference. It does.
So that mental type of taking care of yourself as well.
And physical, because I made sure, obviously, if I'm going out, I'm taking a shower, I'm getting dressed, I'm combing my hair, and going out into the world.
Nice. Now, how does the caregiver really feeling exhausted and overwhelmed contribute to the problem, both for the patient and the caregiver?
Well, you can imagine. If you're exhausted, you're not able to make the best decisions. You may not be able to make any decisions. One thing I've observed again and again is a lack of awareness of the needs of this elderly patient because the relative is in no condition to observe anything. You can't do it. And I've seen this when I also do a lot of work with addiction in families. And there was an aunt and her niece, and the aunt lived in Malibu. And she said she wasn't going to send her niece to a rehab. Wasn't going to send her niece to a rehab. The rehabs were awful. She didn't want to do it. And she lived in Malibu. She had a lot of money. That wasn't the issue. I said, if we send her to a rehab, there are 6 people in the rehab at all times. So that is, a lot of people who can care for your niece. A lot of people who can watch your niece, make sure she's doing okay. She'll have her therapy sessions. She'll have food prepared, all of that. You can't do all this. And my big concern is that you're not going to be able to watch her 24/7. You're going to be asleep, and she's just going to walk out the front door and hitch a ride and get into trouble. And of course, that's exactly what she did. 3 days later, she walked out the front door while her aunt was sleeping. She hitched a ride. She got into trouble, started all over again.
Oh my.
And so then,
It's a
of course,
big
she had to go into,
responsibility.
which nobody can do alone.
That's the main point.
Yeah, can't do it alone.
Now, I know, Susan, that you've learned a lot about long-term policies when your own mother was at the end of her life. Please explain this to us.
A lot of people think that by taking a long-term care policy, that they're going to be able to die alone at home with care. Most long-term policies don't allow you to have care 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So there are ways around it, which I'm not going to discuss on the air, but you can call me and we can talk about it. But the most important thing is to understand that if you've got a long-term care policy, you better read that policy 3 or 4 times while you're fully functional and really understand it. Maybe send it to me and I'll walk you through it so you understand what you can and you can't expect.
Boy, a lot of details here. I know that you have a consultant who's an expert in VA options, Susan. There's one thing that you have learned that almost no one seems to know about VA funding of care. Please explain that to us.
The most important thing, and why most people are rejected when they put in an application for VA funding, which is, to get a check from the VA every month, is they don't realize that they have to be receiving the care first. They have to be paying for the care first. Then and only then can they tell the VA, yes, my husband is getting round-the-clock care. He's in an assisted living facility. It's costing us $5,000 a month. And then the VA will look him up, depending on the years that he served, and they'll decide what he's qualified for. Most people think that they can talk about what their spouse or family member needs, apply for it,
Yes.
and then get the money, as if this were Medicare. It's not like that. It's not like Medicare. It's more like unemployment insurance, where you have to already be unemployed. You can't say, I think I might be fired, so I'm going to sign up for, this, send me a check. No, it's not like that. It's that you already have to have yourself receiving the care. And it could be aid and attendance at home, or it could be assisted living. And the person that we have who's an expert is fabulous. And so if that's your issue, get in touch with me and I'll put you in touch with her.
Boy, that's a good clue for people to move forward on this.
Well, you must have seen this because your father served.
Absolutely. So let's explore. What about dementia and Alzheimer's? What have you seen that few people seem to really know about?
Most of the people that I meet who are of a certain age, I mean late 80s and older, already have pretty visible signs that they are suffering from one or both of these diseases because they're simply not present. They're not really present. And they've zoned out to some degree, and it didn't happen 5 minutes before. And so we're going to talk about prevention later in the show. So that's what it really is about. And it's amazing to me how few people who are in the elder care industry really have an understanding of what the symptoms are.
Oh boy. Now, I know that you've also observed certain factors about the caregivers that often make it dangerous for the patient. What is that?
Yeah, if your family member or loved one wants to stay home, and we were just talking about this earlier, they want to stay home, that's a given. That's like it's a given that your small child doesn't want to eat broccoli, right? It's a given that your small child doesn't want to eat certain vegetables or certain foods. So do you allow that child to just have ice cream for breakfast and for lunch and for dinner? Of course not. But somehow people become very confused about this whole idea of elder care. So nobody wants to die in an assisted living facility, per se. However, nobody wants to die at home because they fell and they can't get up and nobody's checking on them. Nobody wants to have 1,000 other hideous examples of what can happen to somebody living at home alone when they don't have proper care. So it isn't about going to an assisted living facility that's unpleasant. The ones I recommend are beautiful. The people who are there are loving and caring. If somebody has mental functionality, there are lots of places, the only ones I would recommend who's got mental function, where they can make friends and they can talk to people, they can go out and they can do things. So they have a better quality of life than if they're living alone in isolation. That's the point. Now, if somebody is already demonstrating Alzheimer's and dementia, then isolation is a symptom, just like it is with alcoholism and drug addiction. So somebody who drinks a lot isolates. Somebody who can't communicate verbally anymore, they don't make sense anymore, they isolate. But that doesn't mean that that's the best thing for them. In fact, that's the worst thing for them.
We need each other. There's no doubt about it. Now, what is the very common danger of the dependency on emergency rooms that so many elderly experience when they prefer to live at home?
Well, I was shocked. I was talking to a dear friend, and I know his mother. I haven't seen her in many years. And he was saying, oh, yeah, she goes to the ER every week. I said, why does she go to the ER every week? Well, she falls a lot. I said, if she falls a lot, you can imagine the kind of injury she can do to her brain the next time she falls if she's not able to call 911. Whereas she was a very, very intelligent woman. When I knew her, she was a brilliant woman. I said, you know, if you find a great assisted living for her, she could have a private room, she could have her own TV, she could have her books, she could have everything she wants, somebody's making meals for her. She can have a wonderful life, a much better life than the one she has right now, and then there's no danger of her having something terrible happen. So it's about selling it in a way that is positive. Sell the benefits, you don't sell the deficits. Oh, I know you love your bed. Well, if you go to an assisted living facility, you get to bring your bed with you. So it's not that you're being asked to go into a horrible place. These places are beautiful. And for example, my services are all free. So the family doesn't pay for any of the support and advice I give. It's all free. So the company, you know, is set up that way. So just think seriously about how important it is to your loved one not to be living at home alone, falling regularly, ending up in ER, sitting on a gurney for hours and hours and hours at an ER. I mean, none of it makes sense.
That's suffering, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I know that falling is the most common cause of traumatic death in the elderly. What are preventive actions that people can take?
Well, the three most important are you exercising and keeping one foot up and balancing on one foot? Obviously, if you have a problem with balance, then you're going to be off balance, which means you're going to be on one foot, and you need to practice, like a stork, balancing yourself on one foot and doing it regularly. So hold on to something, tuck one foot up, gently get your balance, hold on again. Do this repeatedly while you're watching TV, while you're listening to the radio, something. But do it every single day, repeatedly, so that you're somebody who has balance. The next thing is, for heaven's sakes, wear flats with rubber soles. All these older women who are wearing, high heels and they've got terrible balance and they're falling, just don't do it. What's more important, keeping your brain functioning or how good your legs look? It's a silly question. So the first thing is exercising so you keep your balance. The second thing is being proactive, wearing shoes that don't cause you to have accidents. And once in a while, if you're going to a big event, you have an escort and he's going to hold you as you get in and out of the car and walk around, that's one thing. But I'm talking about every day. And then, of course, the third thing is rearrange your home so that there's nothing to walk into. There's nothing to trip on. You would do it if you had a grandchild visiting. You would baby-proof your house in 2 minutes. Are you elder-proofing your house for yourself or for your husband or for your wife or for your parents? Just easy stuff, common sense, right?
Yes, it does. It does seem like a lot of common sense that maybe we've failed to pay attention to at certain times. So your information is very helpful tonight. Now, I know that it can be very challenging to understand if an older one, loved one, has some type of, oh my goodness, mental understanding of cognitive issues is the word, excuse me. What are some of the tips to observe this, since they seem fine when they visit their doctor?
Well, there are a couple of things. There's the sundowner issue, where somebody can be fine until about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then their brain is exhausted, and they really aren't functional anymore, which is, of course, a good example why they can't be alone. Somebody, isn't able to be alone, that person getting up and going into the bathroom could easily cause an injury that they're never going to recover from. The second thing is somebody may be fine in the very early morning, and by the afternoon they're already not okay. Again, a brain functioning issue, that they don't have their finger on data anymore. They can't logically analyze anything anymore. And this is something that you want to see. Now, yeah, you can get them early morning appointments at the doctor, sure. But again, this isn't somebody who can afford to live alone. They really can't. And it is, again, about their safety. It's about preventing them from having a dangerous accident, which is going to cause a lot of suffering. And the other indication is when you ask someone, I had this experience. Recently, I was working with an elderly woman. So I said, where did you live before you were at the nursing? And she's at a skilled nursing right now. Where did you live? And she said, various places. Oh, okay. And then I drilled down a little bit, and she was not able to tell me where she'd lived. I said, and I imagine you had a career. I'd love to know something about your career. Oh, I had various jobs. So again, this is a tip. She's not able to describe places and jobs and things. The vocabulary is gone. It's just gone. That's aphasia. That's an illness. If somebody doesn't have the ability to remember, then Now, some of us may forget a word here and there. This can happen when you're, in your late 40s or 50s. But you can work around it. If you can't remember that you lived in, let's say Encino, then you can certainly remember the San Fernando Valley. Or you can say, I live near Sherman Oaks, or whatever it is. You can work around that little missing piece. But when somebody is really in trouble, then you ask a few more questions and you can't get an answer. They're not able to get there.
And they're not being secretive, right?
No, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And that's right. If somebody hears that, they may have thought, well, for some reason she doesn't want to tell Susan the information, but of course Susan is the only person who can help her, find a place where she's going to enjoy living, and I don't want to take her to Sacramento or, Joshua Tree if she's used to being, outside of LA. So yeah, she's not being secretive. That's a good point.
Okay, now let's explore this. What about prevention? What's the key? That is the key, isn't it?
Supplements, supplements, supplements. I take 3 brain supplements every single day. I've been doing it for years to prevent myself from forgetting things. And yet I have friends who think it's crazy and they wouldn't do it, and but I keep being able to remember everything that I need to remember. So that's a tip-off, and I've got a couple of friends, and I always have all my clients taking supplements. There's no question about it. Every one of my clients has to take some sort of a saliva and urine at-home test, in the course of coaching with me, because they're going to tell me they have a problem, whatever it is, and it's a problem that can easily be solved with supplements. So of course I'm going to say, great, we can solve that. But you got to figure out what's, in short supply. So supplements are the solution. There's just no way around it. Because if you give your brain the food it needs, and I don't mean nutrition, I don't mean broccoli, but if you give your brain the amino acids and the herbal supplements that it needs, it's going to give you what you need. It's going to be functional. And if you don't, I've never seen a good end. I have never seen a good end. I remember my best friend Linnea doesn't believe in taking supplements. She would take a supplement if she could take one supplement a day. One a day vitamins didn't work 30 years ago. And she refused to take supplements, and she's been dead many years now. And she didn't make intelligent, practical decisions for at least 3 years before she died. At least 3 years before she died. When she decided to, she had cancer, and when she decided to go to the Angeles Medical Center in Los Angeles, she did it because at 3 o'clock in the morning, she read it as Angels Medical Center. She didn't do it because Susan Allan, her best friend, lives in Santa Barbara and could drive down and pick her up at the airport and be with her. That would have been logical, analytical, practical thinking, right? No. She did it because at 2, 3 in the morning, she thought it was the Angel Center because she refused to take brain supplements, and so she wasn't able to think straight. Now, that's a terrible, terrible story to me, because there isn't any real reason why she had to die, except that she made one bad choice after another bad choice after another bad choice. And you can only make so many bad choices in life before you don't get to make another choice at all.
Well, that's a lot of information right there. Now, I know, Susan, that you actually go ahead and you teach your clients how to motivate and inspire their loved ones in so many areas of life. What is the most important aspect regarding elderly care?
Actually, Fred, if you have the Herman Brain Dominance Map, if you could put that up for a minute, thank you, that's great. So when you're motivating anybody, as you know because you've watched GiGi's show with me on it many times, you have to figure out the way they think. So the rational person, you're going to talk about the money that it costs to go there, you're going to talk about the logistics about it, you're going to talk about the qualifications of the people who run the place, you're going to talk about facts, figures, dollars, numbers. If it's the lower left brain, you're going to just focus on safety. You want to go there because you want to be safe, you want to protect your head, you don't want to fall, you want to have the care you need. Even though you've got Meals on Wheels coming, you're just not getting the special diet that you need. And here they're going to give you the special diet, etc. Thank you, Fred. And if you're talking to somebody who's very red, that emotional, interpersonal, then it's all about friends, and you can take your dog with you. And it's just a half a mile from where I live, so I can come visit you and the kids can visit you. So it's all about connection, connection, connection. And finally, the upper right brain, that's the visionary brain. Say you're going to have a private room. They're not going to make you get up in the morning. You're going to be able to have your own hours. It's very quiet there. You'll be able to meditate. They'll be able to turn your meditation tapes on for you. You'll be able to have your vegetarian diet. Somebody will be able to take you to the meditation center for programs every week. So the only difference between living at home and living there is it will be more peaceful because you won't have to struggle to take care of yourself. So see, those are 4 different ways of pitching it to 4 different kinds of people.
Thank you. That's very clear, very helpful. I love that chart. Now, what are the key examples of self-care to prevent dangerous aging issues?
All of the above, really all of the above. So preventative is you've got to figure out what's going on with your brain, you've got to take supplements, and you've got to take them early enough. And you've got to take them every day. And you have to make sure that you're avoiding addictive behaviors. I have a very dear friend who's in an assisted living facility in Santa Barbara because she has alcohol-induced dementia. I mean, she lived in Beverly Hills and she drank and drank and drank and socialized, with all the Hollywood stars. And, many of them already had Alzheimer's and died. She was just younger than they were. And so, she's got that problem. And it shortened her life. I mean, she's still alive, but she's not aware of it. And so the most important thing that you can do for yourself is not only to exercise and do it, if you're retired or if you're, have a limited work schedule, you can exercise almost every day, which I do. I swim up to 54 laps, almost every day. And it makes me feel much better, much stronger. I sleep much deeper. Everything about it is a plus. And the most important thing is to avoid addictive behaviors. So be very careful about that. I mean, obviously, almost nobody smokes anymore. And even if you're using CBD, you're not going to smoke it. And be very, very careful about what you put into your body. Make sure that it's what your body enjoys and that you're doing well. And if not, make changes. Even if you love pork and if you love beef, you still may have to make changes like the rest of us.